So, Dr. Joy, as I mentioned before the break, the conflict in the sister circle, it's
Mhm.
gonna be the death of me. I'm not even kidding. So I was so glad that you addressed this in your book, and because I think this happens to a lot of group friendships among Black women. So where I always find myself is the person who is asked to be to take a side. If there's
Mm.
conflict in the group between two people that ain't got shit to do with me, that I didn't start, somehow it becomes my responsibility to take a side. And
Okay.
I just do not know how to handle it when it's two people beefing in the crew, particularly if I've talked and listened to them both. I've heard
Mhm.
this side of the story, and they're telling me like two different stories.
Hmm.
So there's some conflict that is in a sister circle that I have, and I have thought in my mind like I want to bring everybody together and just kind of lay it out on the table. But maybe because I've seen too many reality shows, because every time they do that, somebody wind up getting a drink tossed on them
Right. It
or
doesn't
it's a
go
fight.
well.
And I was like, it doesn't go well. And I know that if I say, hey y'all, we should all get together, let's just squash whatever beef is amongst the group,
Mhm.
that they're gonna be like, nah, I don't want to, da da da. People are gonna avoid the conversation. So I was like,
Mhm.
oh, so should I be the one that invites everybody, doesn't tell them what they're about, and do kind of like a guerrilla style intervention? I'm not
Yeah.
sure. So as the person who didn't create the conflict in the group, and when you're being asked to pick a side, I just don't know how to handle it. So I just laid all that in your lap. Please fix it for me.
Right. Right.
Fix it.
Now you want me to pick a side.
Now I want you to fix it. I'm not saying pick a side, but I'm like, I am really bad at handling that. I don't even want to say that I'm really bad, but some of my friends where this has happened in the past, they've tried to, and I've taken offense to this. They tried to accuse me of being disloyal because I didn't pick a side. Well, you didn't tell
Mm.
such and such they were wrong, and I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't even know what the wrong is because y'all telling
Mhm.
me two different things.
Right.
So like,
Right.
I don't really want to jump in the middle of that,
Right.
but I feel like a lot of times with women, we give our romantic partners way more leeway and way more compassion and way
Mhm.
more grace
Grace.
than we do our
Yes.
friends. We do, like, sometimes you could do one thing or a couple things and then that friendship is just over, and it's over, as you talk about in the book, by ghosting, by like they just stop dealing with each other, and then that's
Mhm.
it. And then when I have a function and I want to invite the disagreeable parties,
Yes.
then it's awkward for me. And I'm like, I
Right.
ain't even do shit. How did I now why am I in it
Why am I in
supposedly?
it? How did I get here?
Why am I in it? How did I get here? So anyway, I lay
Yes.
this all on your lap, Dr. Joy, because
Yes.
clearly I needed to get that off my chest. So
Clearly, I'm
I
glad you
just am
did.
trying to think of a workable solution about how to resolve
Mhm.
conflict in a group dynamic, even if it may not lead to them being friends like they once were.
Right.
But I at least want us to be able to be around each other and it
Mhm.
not be like that tension in the room.
Right, right. So, one, I find it really interesting that you find yourself in this situation multiple times. So that to me speaks to like there's some role that you are playing in your groups that people kind of see you as this like so you probably are the leader in a lot of your groups, right? Like people kind of go to you to kind of be the one to break the tie, so to speak, right? So I think that is telling. And I think it's something for you to consider about whether you actually enjoy this role, because there's a part of you that's
I do
saying like
not.
I do
I do
not
not enjoy this
you're
role.
you're like I'm good to be the one
No.
planning the vacations, but I do not like this role in terms of
Mm-mm,
choosing a
mm-mm.
side.
Can I be the wallflower? Can I be the wallflower? I'd rather be that. Like
Obviously
I don't want to
not.
be the leader.
Obviously not. They're dictating that you are being this. But and I also agree with you, like this kind of intervention that nobody knows about, where you kind of get them both to your house and they don't know the circumstances, is probably not a good idea. That's not how we want to
Okay, all
have
right. I'll throw
not
that one out the window. Okay, fine.
not how we want to have difficult conversations. But I do think you can go to them and say, this feels really uncomfortable for me. Like, I am not sure why I'm being asked to take a side when I love you both. Right. And I do wish that we could all come together to talk about this with one another, even if it means y'all still feel the same way that you did. Like, is there a way we could come together to try to discuss this as a group? But that also may mean bringing in somebody else, right? So there are therapists who do like friendship therapy, or like, is would they be open to talking with the therapist or someone else about what happened and how to move forward? And again, that may not mean that we are resuming the friendship, but can we be in the similar space or the same space with one another, because you're going to be having events or things like that. I do think something like that, if they are open to it, would be a great idea. But I do think it's important for you to first voice that you don't like being put in this position and that it makes things awkward for you.
Yeah, and maybe that, and I have struggled to do that because, of course, I want to be supportive. And when you're dealing with maybe, multiple friends who
Yeah.
you want to show up for them, but I feel like they're asking me to do something that's like putting me in a bit of an impossible situation.
Right.
And when it gets flipped back on me, like, oh, if it were reversed, like if anybody that say you ain't fool with, I wouldn't fool with either. I ain't ask you to do that, and I wouldn't ask you to do that, right?
Right.
Like I would not.
Right.
Would not.
Exactly.
If you chose to do that on your own, that's on you. But like I
Mhm.
wouldn't do that. Like I just be like,
Right.
I don't fool with that person, and that's for me and that person to work out. If
Right.
there is something to be worked out, or at the very least come to an understanding, like, I don't fool with you. We good. Let's just
Mhm.
go our separate directions. So
Right.
that's, one part of it. The other part that I think can be tough in group dynamics is when one friend has a problem with another friend, but they have
Mm.
not told the friend what they have a problem about.
Yes.
But yet it shows up when we're in the group dynamic.
Mm.
So what is the language I need to use to maybe encourage them to solve the problem?
So is it that you know that they have a problem with the other friend because they've told you, or you've just observed it?
No, they told me. And they
They
told me,
told
they
you.
laid out exactly what the problem was. And it was something that was building, something that had
Yes.
been, it started with one incident. They noticed
Mhm.
other behavior. And much to something else you talk about in your book, they started building a narrative in their head. And now the
Mm.
narrative's taken root.
Gotten too
And
big.
now I'm like, it's gotten too big. So I'm just like, I wish you would just talk to this person and tell them, but I don't know if I just don't know the proper way or the proper language to use to tell them, like, yo, y'all need to handle this.
Mhm. Mhm.
Or you do, rather,
Right.
because the other person has no idea.
The other person has no idea, and you are so right. Like, when we kind of start trying to build a case and like make up this whole story in our heads about why someone has done something else, then it really gets away from us, right? So, ideally what we would want to have happen is, if the first time somebody like hurts your feelings or offends you or whatever, is to actually say to them, like, that hurt, like, ouch, that hurt me. Because then you give people an opportunity to like let you know, like, okay, here's what I was thinking, and I apologize, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, or whatever it is. But now that we are here, I think, one way to approach it would be to go to the friend who has, divulged his information and say, hey, I don't know if you realize this, but you may think you're kind of like hiding how you feel about whatever the situation is, but you're not. And here's what I've seen. And I really feel like it is impacting our dynamic. And I think this is important to think about because, everybody has like individual relationships with one another as a part of the group, but the group is also like an entity of its own. And so when you have these kinds of subgroupings, is what I talk about in the group, and things like are going awry, it impacts the entire group, which is what you're saying right now. So now you're like, oh, I don't even know if we need to be together because I know she got some, hidden feelings about her. So I think the best thing for you to do would be to go to this friend and say, hey, what would it take for you to share this with this person so that we can maybe have some resolution here?
Yeah, because what I fear is that if the other person notices that the behavior has changed with the friend, and they're like, why are they acting this way toward me or whatever,
Mhm.
then I'm gonna be put back in the middle. Now why am I in it?
So we're
That's
back
the
at
fear.
square one, is that
So
you
we
have
back at
now
square
found
one.
yourself in the middle of it. And Jemele, it may come to a point where you have to kind of share stuff with the group, right? So if you go to this person and she's not willing to say how she feels, you are also well within your rights, I think, when y'all are hanging out, to say, hey, I've noticed Like, it feels like something is going on here, and really just giving voice to the elephant in the room, so to speak, so that you can kind of put the cards on the table so that you can possibly get to a resolution or not. But everybody kind of tiptoeing around one another, like, it really is stymieing the intimacy in the group in a lot of ways, because y'all are really not being honest with one another.